Welcome to the Lucent Perspective. I'm your host, Rebecca Hastings. I've spent over a decade working with executives in the tech sector and helped successful companies build their leadership teams and scale. During my career, I've been lucky to have the privilege of learning from many exceptional leaders. In these conversations, you'll get perspectives from peers, be inspired, and learn what it takes to become one of the best. This is your chance to listen to experts talking about the challenges, solutions, and the vital insights they've gained in their careers to date. Today, we're joined by Matt Little. Matt Little has worked in the technology sector for over 20 years, and he has worked with companies such as ZoneFox, which exited to Fortinet. And at the moment, he works as an interim and fractional CPTO, startup advisor, non-executive director, and chairperson. And he's been involved in companies such as Melius, Collabco, which was acquired by Ready Education, and Genba Digital, which was acquired by Azerion. So, Matt, thanks so much for taking time to speak to us today. I am super excited to hear about your career and your insights into the world of technology and product. My first question for you is, what attracted you to the startup world? Because I know that you actually worked in quite corporate environments before that.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you very much for inviting me along. So, when I left university, my first few jobs were for large organizations, and I found they were quite slow moving. The decision-making process took forever. I never quite understood why. Everyone agreed something was a good idea, but it would take 6 months to make anything happen. And I got to a point, I've been through a couple of exits at that point, and I'd really enjoyed the sort of building to an exit. And I decided that rather than working for a sort of medium-sized company and helping it to exit, actually what I wanted to do was go join a proper startup, really early days startup. So I went to work for a company. I was the sixth person in the office. And I was also one of the first commercially experienced people in the organization, which some people call founding team. And I really liked two things. One was building something. I really liked actually creating an organization that was getting bigger, generating customers, building brand new product, but also what I would term the immediacy of action. In other words, we could make a decision and we could all agree this is a great thing to do. There's data to back this up. Let's make this happen. And we could do it the next day and we could see the results in a couple of weeks. None of this kind of, you put it in front of a committee, the committee meets every 3 months, and then 9-12 months later, you see a result. We used to be able to turn stuff around much, much quicker. And that's what I really enjoyed. And at that point, I think I got pretty hooked on startup world. Somebody, it may even have been you, first 6 months into working at a startup, you told me, I think, you're never going to go work for a big company again, are you? And at the time, I don't think I understood that. And now I do. There is just so much opportunity for startups. There are so many interesting challenges that people are tackling and so many great entrepreneurs out there to work with. So yeah, I love startup land and I wouldn't leave it.
That's really interesting because a lot of the startups that I'm working with, they want people who come from startups rather than large organizations. But, thinking back to that time, you obviously were so, very hands-on technically when you needed to be. But I think it's often overlooked just like the commercial experience that someone can bring if they have come from a large company right into that startup world. And I think that, that mindset that you've just described that you embodied when you were working there is probably a lot more important than anything else.
Yeah, so I agree. I think someone has to have the right mindset. Now, some people test that by expecting people to have come from startup and only work in startup, but you can get it anywhere. I mean, I was an entrepreneur even when I worked at a large company. I just didn't know it. So I got the opportunity to express that in a startup. The benefits with having brought that large company experience is when we started to scale, just simple things like, HR issues. or other things that a startup's never come across. As somebody working in a larger organization, well, I know how this works. I know how to do annual appraisals. I know how to do this kind of thing. So I brought that experience with me, and it's saved, for example, getting in external advisors or whatever to help with some of that. So I think the challenge as a founder is, yes, startup mentality, but they may have significant large company experience as well.
Yeah, and everyone wants someone to work for them who's T-shaped. I guess if you're in the right role in the right corporate company, you can have a broader skill set that you take to that early stage environment. So that company that you joined, that was Zone Fox, and they had a really fascinating journey. I was involved in it like slightly by helping you hire people, but it was, great to be part of it. But it would be good to hear from you, like what the kind of like key challenges that you encountered there. What were the kind of like product market fit challenges being in such an early stage business?
Okay, so I joined the company, had one customer at that stage, and they were getting a lot of really positive feedback from that customer, which was great. That was also their biggest Achilles heel, because they had one customer, and effectively whatever that one customer wanted, the team built. And there was a real risk that the product became specific to our customer rather than a generalized product. So I think product market fit was achieved in part by listening to that customer, but also ignoring that customer at times and thinking about what does the general market need and trying to generalize the solution. And once we got our first 3, 4, 5 customers, that became easier until it became harder when we had lots of customers. And then suddenly the chief exec and myself were trying to listen to a huge number of customers and trying to balance all these requests. And it's very easy to get dragged into the conversation of, I want this one feature. If only you give me this feature. And part of the journey I've been on towards CPTO is digging into what's the problem we're trying to solve here. What's the customer problem? What's the challenge they have? Why can't they do it with other products? Why can't they do it with our product? What workarounds are they using at the moment? And really understanding that kind of loop. Because if you understand that, then you can build something that is a general solution to a problem.
That's a great insight, especially for a company that's early days. And it is so easy to be pulled in the direction of what your customers want to do rather than stick to strategy, especially when you're under pressure to keep revenue coming in. So that's great.
No, I was going to say absolutely. And it's one of those things where the sales team come along and say, if you write me this one feature, I can sign a big customer. And you're looking at your strategy thinking, well, that's not what we're aiming to do. But you've got the commercial pressure of, but we could really do with the revenue. And the customer will definitely sign if you build that for me.
And, as an investment money is tightening up just now, I think that's a trap that a lot of early stage businesses need to be aware of, and certainly take quite a balanced approach to between the immediate and the long term where they can.
Yeah, and if there's a great book, The Build Trap, out there, go get it on Kindle, Amazon, whatever. And this covers this really well. And I found myself reading that years ago, reading the first few chapters, just thinking, yep, I made that mistake. Yep, I remember doing that. Yep. And it's one of those books where you just walk away thinking, crikey, I could have done with this 10 years ago. So if you find yourself in that space, go read the book. It's a really fascinating read.
That's a great recommendation. I'll put a link in the notes so people can find that later. So one of the other things that was really interesting about Zone Fox was that the team grew just so quickly. I think there were like 6 of you, then maybe like 9 a few days later. Then within months, like how big had the team grown across the business?
So, well, we secured a significant round of investment, and that was to fund team growth. And we went from, I think off the top of my head, from about 12 to about 25. And I took the call. I spoke with the chief exec and the board about how we were going to do that. And Yes, I mean, you very much helped us on the recruitment side of things, but I was keen, and people thought I was a bit crazy doing this. I was keen to actually get all the new starts in at once and do this as a wave rather than a sort of trickle. And my logic for that was, and people disagreed with this, but I think it was the right thing still to do. My logic was we treat them as a cohort, almost like university, all the first years come in at the same time, because it takes so much time to onboard people and train them. And a lot of it's common. So what's the mission? What are the values? What are we trying to achieve? What does the product do? Who are our customers? So my view is we get in a cohort and we train them all on that stuff simultaneously. And then once we've done that, then they can go off to their specific teams and learn the specifics for their role. I think it works pretty well. And the side effect of that was not only did we reduce overhead for the leadership team, but also that cohort that came in built a lot of team spirit because they'd all come in together and they're all new starts together. So they got to know one another and form really strong relationships, working relationships with one another. So rather than just having, one new start in this team, a couple in this team and a couple over there who didn't know one another and they felt isolated, actually, they had a great working relationship. So it was a bit left field, that approach, but for us, I think it worked really well.
Having spent time in that office, I do think that it really fostered a sense of team spirit, and it meant that everybody was onboarded properly to the business, which is something a lot of early stage companies, that it's just really time consuming for someone to constantly be taking out for one person to do the demo, another person to talk through the culture and values, just to explain this is how we work here. And I think that one of the other benefits was it gave everybody a much more holistic view of what was happening in the organization. So although it seemed like very much like a bit of a big bang, more than doubling a small company overnight, it made the change process much smoother. And everybody within the existing team was involved in some way. So all the people who were there before everyone in the new cohort joined. So people got to know each other pretty well.
Yep. So I agree. And, the chief exec and myself, we put together what we called Stonefox University, his idea, and I think it was a great name. And we had different sections within that. And we challenged one another to create content. And I would demo my content to him and he would do the same to me. And we would make sure we were both happy with it and, it's the best it could be. So that when we presented it to the team, it wasn't just a poor leader doing something they knocked together in half an hour. This was a well thought out, well structured, sequenced onboarding program, which we wouldn't have had time to do if we were doing this drip, 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 sort of one person at a time into different teams. The chief exec and I spent, several weeks putting this together, but the return was, as you say, huge because it built knowledge. It got everyone on the same page. What are we about? Why do we do this? Why do people care? What problem are we solving? How do we work? What do we value? What don't we value? So that was really important for us.
Another thing that I would be fascinated to get your insights on, it's just a topic of conversation, which seems to come up quite a bit just now, is about getting the most out of your engineering team as you grow. A lot of people are keen to truly scale rather than just add bodies to a process and, try and really reap the benefits of having extra people in their team. So it would be great if you could tell me a little bit about that. And where I'd like to start is, you have some great insights on this. So could you tell me a little bit about the difference between effectiveness and efficiency of development teams?
Sure, of course, Rebecca. So I find a lot of companies struggle at the point they move between, when it was 2 engineers or 3 engineers, there was almost telepathy. They didn't have to talk. They just knew what was going on and they could work really efficiently together. Great. When you start hitting 6, 7, 8, it becomes a bit more difficult. And when you start going north of about 8 engineers, suddenly nothing works. It feels like you're walking through treacle, you're dragging a big anchor behind you, everything's slow, it's broken, it doesn't work. So that's the point at which people start worrying about efficient teams and trying to make the team more efficient. They think that means working faster. And that is what efficient means. It means, I can put out a release every day as opposed to every week. Great. But I've challenged that, and I've got a couple of insights papers on my website talking about the difference between efficient and effective. Because there is a well-known principle that something like 80-90% of code written is never used by users or only ever used infrequently. So what actually we should be doing is not trying to write that code faster, but not write that code. Only write the code that people are going to use. And that's what I term effective. So I want teams to be effective. Even there may be more efficient teams who can churn out code faster, but I want to be the team that's writing the code that people are going to use, because that's the value.
And how do you go about achieving that outcome? Because it seems so logical. It's actually a challenge that, resonates across so many industries. Like in recruitment, I only want to contact the relevant candidates rather than lots of candidates. So there's probably something that anyone listening to this can take from the conversation.
Yep. And you're right. It's at the most naive level, it's simple. It seems ridiculously simple. Well, of course, I'm not going to, it gets called working smarter rather than harder in some areas. But for product, it's about, and this is where the CPTO role really came from. It's about recognizing it's not just about code quality. You need to go speak to your customers, find out what they want to buy, find out what problems they have, find out how they would like to solve those problems, and then bring it back to the engineering team and say, well, how can this be built? And if so, how do we build it? So, I look with my CPTO hat on, I look at various different risks. The value risk. Can I sell this? Can I make money from it? Usability risk. Can I build something that is customers are going to enjoy using from a UX perspective? The feasibility, is it technically possible? And then the business viability. Are we the right people to build this? So if we take value first, I want to understand, is anyone going to buy this? Why are they going to buy it? What problem am I solving for people? And that's where, if I get that right, I can then engage engineering to do the feasibility piece. Is it possible? Are we the right company to build it? And that's how I work out, right, what's the 20% that people are going to use often or all the time?
So that's really interesting, I guess, just, working smarter, but that's actually being a little bit more strategic and commercial and taking a more holistic view to things rather than, busy work. So I'm just interested to know, you started at ZoneFox as a CTO, and then you've now moved into a CPTO role. How did you make that transition? It's something a lot of people are interested in, but don't really know how to do. And there's ambiguity about what that CPTO role looks like. So it'd be good if we could discuss all this, but find out how you transitioned.
Sure, of course. So I made that transition because I made a load of mistakes. Okay, I came into the CTO role and I knew my technology background. I could lead teams to build really, really good, well-engineered product. But I found as a team, we'd get super excited about some new feature and we'd put it out there and we'd find customers were ambivalent about it. And we were struggling to get people to adopt it and use it regularly. And I think over the years, I began to realize this difference between writing really good code directed by gut feel. What do I think? My intuition tells me a customer might like this. To actually managing the risk better and asking customers more, or understanding what job they're trying to do, and then solving that, and then creating lightweight sort of MVPs or demo products or something to show customers and get their feedback. Now, I made the mistake initially of just trying to drive the product. Although I was CTO, I kind of almost had product responsibility, and I tried to drive it too much through my intuition. And through learning, seeing other people do it better, through various readings, I've learned there is a more effective way to do that. So I found myself in a place where I really like human psychology and understanding the way people think, the way people buy, the way people evaluate. And I took that sort of personal interest, mixed it with my technology background, and found myself, unfortunately, between a CPO, Chief Product, and a CTO, Chief Technology. And I found myself sort of in the middle. And people used to ask me, are you a CTO or a CPO? And I didn't know. And then someone really helpfully invented the term CPTO to define that person stuck in the middle. So I was like, thank goodness, I've got a badge that I can wear that actually describes what I think I've been doing for several years now.
So it sounds like a combination of just being really close to the customer, testing and validating ideas before proceeding, and being open to other people's feedback a little bit more seems to have helped you along that journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think lesson number one, be humble. You don't have the answers. You need the tools and skills to go find the answers. And you, as you said, Rebecca, you need to be open to, because someone will come along saying, I want this, and I think it should be done this way. And you're going to have this feeling in your gut, well, that's rubbish. I would never do it that way. And you need to be humble enough to say, actually, I probably got this wrong. You're the customer, you're the one with the money, you're the one with doing this day to day, you're the one with the problem. So I will be open to the idea that I made a mistake and I got it wrong. And let's try it your way and see if your way works. And I will take your ideas and I'll play them back to several other customers and see if it resonates with them. But yeah, there's nothing worse for CTO or engineering teams than getting really excited about the latest development, putting it up there on the App Store or releasing it to customers, and nobody uses it. It's the worst outcome ever. And I've been there. Most teams have been there. So that's what I try to avoid.
So if somebody wants to move into a CPTO role, I think that doing that within an early stage startup or scale up business is the ideal place, because the constraints that are placed on that business really augment the possibility for that opportunity to become a reality if you want to take yourself beyond technology.
Yep. So agreed. And I think a really early stage startup, if you're wearing the hat of CTO, then ask the question, who's covering product? Because if it's not you, then who is? And if no one else is, you need to do it. So you need to, again, think about, how do I decide what the product is? For the next stage of organization, maybe there's sort of 10, 20, 30 people. You might have a product officer or you might have a formal CPTO. That's the point at which I work with a lot of organizations, helping mentor and guide their product teams and really get them working effectively together with engineering. So you have those kind of two stages, I guess, three, the stage after. But the first stage is you're the person. Doesn't matter what your title is, you're probably covering technology and product together. You might be CEO, you might be Chief Technology Officer, you might be something else, but you're kind of probably covering it all. The next stage is you're maybe more formally recognized as having product, and you need to hone your skills, and advisors can help with that. And then the stage after is you're probably a board level, chief product, whatever, and you have several, maybe a CTO underneath you and a CPO underneath you, and you've got teams of people doing stuff. So recognizing which of the three phases you're in, and then gathering the appropriate skills, background, reading, study, mentors, people around you to help you. That's probably the most important thing.
That's some fantastic advice there and some great tips. So now you're out on your own. You've been consulting with some of these amazing businesses over the last couple of years. Was it now you've been in 5 exits in your career you've been involved in? That's phenomenal. You've obviously worked out how to bring a lot of value to those businesses based on some of the stories. Could you tell me a little bit about how you've helped them do that through strategy and teams and anything technical that's relevant? That would be amazing.
Of course. Yeah, so I've been through 5 exits, 3 with myself and 2 as an advisor. And so I've seen the whole build up to exit. I've seen the due diligence process. I've helped companies through that. But your question about how you build value, it's so there are various different metrics, and revenue is one of them, but it's the one that people tend to focus on. But what I look for is long-term product viability, long-term customers, ease of attracting customers, holding on to customers. And sure, that will deliver revenue, but I don't like to focus on revenue first, because if you focus on revenue first, then you will make short-term decisions, is my opinion. So you will make a decision, you'll sign up a customer and they're a bad customer. They're, a customer that's not a good fit, or they want a whole lot of work done to the product. And if they're a bad fit, they'll churn. They'll leave you after the first year. So I look for long-term growth, and that's what builds the value in an organization. Finding a set of customers with a similar problem, coming up with a solution that solves that problem for multiple customers, and then talking about that product to that persona of customer. And that's what builds value in the organization, because that's what you can scale. And as an investor or acquirer, they're going to come in with their money or assistance or team or whatever, and they can magnify, they can scale that up. But if you've just got a series of one-off sales, which a lot of startups do, they have great revenue numbers, but they're really just a series of one-off sales, you can't scale that.
Yeah. Something needs to be repeatable and expandable and, documented, well thought out. I think that goes across all businesses.
Yeah, so absolutely agree. And a good acquisition team, a good DD team can spot that. They'll be able to work out, is it just you've had 10 bluebirds, 10 one-off sales that have landed, or actually do you have something that is repeatable? And this is why I get concerns with companies that solely talk about revenue numbers as a success piece, because there are markets, there are businesses out there, and I could make a load of money, but I'd be out of business after a year or two because my customers, it's not a good fit, or the product isn't going in the direction that they want.
So I speak to founders every day and leadership teams, and there's a couple of common challenges that I'm seeing come up time and time again. And one of them that I'd love your insight on is, how do you balance scaling product and tech and knowing where to put your resources across the two functions?
So it's a huge challenge for a lot of organizations. And this is actually where I think the CPTO role comes into its own. Because if you have a CTO and a CPO, they're effectively fighting for resource a lot of the time. The resource is the engineering team or QA team or whatever. The CPTO or someone with joint responsibility actually has to balance it themselves. They're not fighting. They're just looking for the best outcome. And a good CPTO balances things like working on technical debt, for example, with new sales opportunities. And there are various different models out there for modeling the potential return from a particular development. But the key thing for me is, what is your strategy and what's going to take you closer to your strategy? Because again, it's very easy to get distracted by people talking about, we need to fix this technical debt, or we need this new library because it's very cool and we'd love to use it. Or else, if we do this, we get $500,000 of revenue or whatever. Focus on your goal. What's the strategy? What's the outcome you're looking for? And what takes you closest to that?
And what other challenges do you hear people coming to you and saying, oh gosh, I'm really stuck with this?
So I think the one we just described, that kind of balance between tech and product, is probably the greatest one. The other challenge, obviously, is people. Trying to get more good people. And it's something, Rebecca, you'll obviously be intimately close to, just trying to find good team. Because, the mantra I've always had is you hire for tomorrow. It's not about your tech skills today. You need adaptable people. People who are desperate to learn and grow with the organization. And one of the biggest challenges at the moment is a lack of people who have those kind of skills and are willing to grow with the organization. So and I know it's something we've seen for years and years, insufficient good tech people. But I think it's got more critical over the last couple of years or so. And as I've moved, maybe it's me having moved more into the product space, and I see this more, but the number of good product people on the market is really small. There's a lot of people who are CTOs who suddenly saw the new term CPTO and just stuck a P in their LinkedIn profile. Right. And they're not product people at all. So I work with organizations, and often we're looking for good product people. It's really hard.
And I think that for me, when I'm helping companies put together a product team, even the founders aren't always sure what kind of product people they need. Product means so many different things. Is it product strategy? Is it product marketing? Is it technical product advice that they need? Is it product management? Is it product ownership? And I don't think that people are always clear on how to identify and assess what their actual requirement is. Certainly, working back from the end result is a great place to start, and knowing what you need someone to achieve rather than just what you think you need would be my tip for anyone who's facing that dilemma just now. I think
that's a great tip. I really do. And I've worked with you quite a bit in the past, Rebecca, and one of the things I really like is, so I've worked with some recruiters who do not know the differences between the different roles that you were just mentioning. And it's apparent that they're about to try and hire me the wrong type of person. I like working with you because you know this stuff and you've dealt with it a lot, and it's very easy to have a conversation with you. But where I add value to organizations is sitting down and thinking, what does the end goal look like? What do we need to deliver this? How many product managers are we going to need? A CPO? How does technology fit into that? What does the tech structure look like? And then work with the recruitment partner to bring those people into the organization.
And I certainly think that more thoughtful approach can end up saving companies a lot of time and money. Getting something out there quickly can be just as advantageous as doing it cheaply. And
I think you're right. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day, Rebecca, and by the time you go through CVs, you brief a recruiter, go through CVs, interview, onboard, whatever, get that person up to speed, and then that person is not fully productive initially. It takes them maybe 6 months. But during those 6 months, they're then asking maybe a couple of other people for help regularly. You're losing 1 to 1.5 years worth of people time for each role, at least. And therefore, getting it right and getting the right person in it's a false economy to go cheap, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're better to have, especially in an early stage, less time from people with more experience. And, obviously that's not like the right solution as a company is growing beyond their first few hires, but it makes all the difference if there's that solid foundation there.
Yeah, agreed. And that's in part why I do what I do on a fractional basis, sort of part-time basis with companies. So they maybe don't need my skills full-time, or, they don't have a role big enough yet or enough money. So by me working with them on a fractional basis to help get them to where they need to be now, and then bring in people, maybe less experienced, but maybe mentored by me or whatever, so to take them to the next stage, works really well.
So another thing that I'd love to speak to you about is what to do when growth in a company is starting to stall. I can see that happening in a couple of areas. It's really challenging. Its cost of acquisitions increased for lots of businesses. So like there are metrics that people can look to, but actually from the CPTO perspective, or your perspective, as an advisor and board member in some of these businesses, what are the places that people should be looking to get to the root of that problem?
Yep. So when I advise boards or sit on boards, I go back to basics at this point. What is it that worked before but is not working now? Why, if we're building good product that customers want and we're approaching the right customers about it and presenting it in the right way, then we should be making sales. So something in that chain is broken. And going back to basics and understanding, have we got off the rails? Have we stopped listening to customers and now building something they don't want? Or are we, you sometimes see organizations taking a really well-focused product and thinking a sort of shotgun approach of just sending it out to anybody will help scale their business or, something. So I like just go back to basics and say, speak to your customers. The latest version, if you're measuring, whether it be pirate metrics or heart metrics or whatever it is, understanding how many people are using your product, what percentage of your user base are using the new feature you've just put out there? How often do they use it? How frequently do they come back? And use that data to drive an understanding of what's happening to your product and then change your strategy accordingly.
Totally. And that makes so much sense. But I think it's really easy for this to happen. And the knee jerk is quite often, it's sales, marketing, or growth are to blame for growth stalling. And, that creates a bit of, there's always going to be friction in an organization around those areas. But actually being a lot more analytical about the product and how it's being used could save you a lot of money and, get to the root of the problem in a more effective way is your message.
Agree. Absolutely that. So, and a good product manager. So a sales team go out and sell the product, as is the perfect solution. So they don't go out and try and sell a future product or a product with extra bits added on. Mm-hmm. So if the sales team are doing that, taking the standard product out to customers and trying to sell it, if it's not working, it's not really the sales team's fault. There is something wrong with the product or identification of customers or something like that. And a good product manager who's strategic will work out what is wrong and then realign it.
Totally. So one of the things that we touched on earlier, when we were talking about your experiences, you've been involved in 5 exits. And that's a lot of experience in that space and something which, very few people will have been involved in so many businesses where there is an acquisition. So I would like to know from you, when should companies think about preparing to exit?
So my simple answer to this is they shouldn't. Okay. And that's a slightly contradictory answer to what I'm about to say. Don't get focused on exit. Get focused on building your business, building repeatable product sales, etc. But put in place the foundations, the groundwork for an exit as soon as possible. So make sure, and I do a lot of work with companies. I've done due diligence. I've been asked a lot of questions by people doing due diligence, and I know what it looks like and I know risks. So I go into organizations and I'm able to put an independent perspective on things and say, as an acquirer or investor, that risk over here is too high. You need to address that. That risk over here is fine. Don't worry about that. So you can start looking at those things because they're good for the business and building the things that acquirers or investors will look for and dealing with those risks early. Tip number 1, don't leave it till too late because a good DD team will spot you trying to write the answer to their question and pretend it was written 6 months ago. They'll spot that straight away. Okay. So don't think about exit because you'll get distracted and stop doing the day job, but do put in place the foundations for a potential exit now.
And just keeping your filing systems clear and really basic stuff can help. And having basic governance policies and procedures, make sure that you know where your contracts are and that you have them all signed. And
Yeah, absolutely. So build a data room now. Go do it now
yeah.
and populate it. A good chair will think about these governance frameworks, think about good governance, which includes everything you just mentioned, and ensure that the board are doing those things because it's the right thing to do for the business. So going back to my earlier point, it's not about we're trying to create an exit, so let's do this. It's about this is right for the business, so let's do it.
And you never know when someone is going to contact you with, an opportunity. You just don't know.
Absolutely.
You cannot always manufacture these things and think, oh, it's this year we're going to sell. You want to make yourself just, the best on the market so that you are snapped up and have more control of those negotiations.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. So, because if you haven't done it, if you've left risks open, what happens is people come along and they chip the price. They sit and they go, well, we were going to pay this much, but we don't like this risk, so we're going to knock $500,000 off. So you want to avoid that. But to your point, I've had two conversations around a potential acquisition, one of which was started with a LinkedIn message to me. And the other of which started with, we went to demo the product to somebody in their office and have a cup of tea. And at the end of it, he said, great. Are you thinking of being acquired? Because we might like to talk about that. Both of them were out of the blue. Mm-hmm. So you never know where it's going to come from. But yeah, if you've done all the good stuff, you've got good governance, you've got a chair or non-execs helping put that in place, and then you've got your data room with all that ready. You've looked at the big risks to avoid people trying to cut the price back. Then when it happens, and it will happen if you're a good company, you're ready.
That's really valuable advice. And I think that by putting those things in early on, the added benefits are it's a lot less stressful when things do happen. And a lot of what you need to do to prepare for an exit is going to be similar to what you need to prepare for taking on investment. So whatever comes first, you're putting yourself in place for growth.
Absolutely, 100%. And one of the roles I did as an advisor, again, doing this analysis of risk within the organization from a acquirer investor's perspective, we did all that over 6 months and we built it because it was the right thing for the business. And then when a due diligence team did come along, it was an easy conversation because we knew what they would consider risky and we'd already dealt with that appropriately. So actually, it was a straightforward conversation.
Interesting. And in terms of your advice for people just now, you've been involved in so many companies, great successes, and being on the board. From that perspective, what qualities are you seeing in the leadership teams that have successfully exited? What is it about those individuals that's helped propel them to that place?
Humility and openness to learning. Learn as much as possible, as quickly as possible, adaptable, and they listen. And actually, a lot of the other skills they can make up for if they've got those things. The worst leadership teams are the ones who have got closed ears, they don't want to hear input from other people, or else they're the seasoned professionals who sit there and say, I don't need to do this. I've done this for enough years. I don't need to do that. Or else the people who really don't have the appetite, they don't have that appetite for learning, to learn new things or try new things. So I think if you've got those, and if you use values to hire, if your values are around humility, around openness, around a lack of ego, around a thirst for learning, and you hire those people at board level, your organization will do a lot better.
That's great. So really looking for that, I guess, openness, which is going to make it easier for people to, I think it's easier to empower a team if you say, I don't have the answers, it's up to you sometimes. And people get more excited when they're given that level of trust and autonomy. Like they're far more likely to feel valued as well. So I guess if those tools enable successful delegation. The point about humility is so important. And I see people like talk about being humble and how important it is. But I think that it's hard to assess humility because it's you know what you're meant to say. There's so much information out there about it. And people are sometimes a little bit like, sometimes the level of humility they display based on their experience is impacted by the environment that they're operating in. You know, I can think of times and places where it's not, you've needed to have a good degree of bravado and, you know, a sense of we can do anything and we know the answers in order to just create a bit of zeal and momentum. So have you any tips for trying to identify humility? And I know I'm putting you on the spot and it's a tricky one.
That is a really hard one. I'm going to answer a slightly different question to give myself a few seconds to think. So 2 of the greatest skills a leader can have are vulnerability and humility. And I've seen their leaders, and I can think of one chief exec who had a complete inability to be vulnerable. They always had to have the answer. And it's had a culture within the leadership team that was really challenging because nobody was able to make a mistake at that point. The experimentation culture went out the window. So I think humility and vulnerability are 2 of the greatest and most underrated skills in a leader. How do you assess for humility or vulnerability? I don't know. And I think if I did know that answer, I'd probably make £1 million. But I think there is a chemistry thing there, and you can do the sort of various interview techniques to try and uncover that. But I think you just get a sense from somebody. If you're an experienced interviewer, and this is where I've used your skills, Rebecca, in the past to help interview, because you're hugely experienced in this space, and just trying to uncover, do we really think this person is authentically humble and vulnerable, or is it just a screen they're putting up?
And I would like, just listening to there is maybe think of 2 things that you could do. And they're not necessarily fully recruitment focused, but they should be part of your process and things you're considering. The first obvious one is referencing. Does it match up? And I think that it's, for a lot of companies, they're quite happy just to, a standard, look for Joe Bloggs worked here from 1st of January 2020 until whatever date in the future. And that's all you're given. And there's reasons why companies feel that that's all they can provide. But I do think that we've kind of like lost a lot of insight and even just like how to get the best out of our new hires by dropping the ball with referencing in general. I think that there is a way to take a good reference and to get somebody to tell you informally. And for humility, when you were talking about it, being able to say, I don't have all the answers and I might be wrong, those are really challenging for companies. If you have no humility in your leadership team and people think they know everything, hopefully it's not the case, but if you have that tends to seep throughout your organization and that culture goes all the way down to the bottom. So maybe a way to assess humility that I could think more about would be how to find out what they think the cultural challenges are, and when people have had challenges of people who work for them not demonstrating humility, because that would be indicative.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach. I give you a very funny, I think it's funny, story of humility. So we were asking a candidate once about humility. It's quite a senior role in an organization. And in part because I had to rush there and miss lunch, and in part because I was just being nice, I brought some cakes with me. So we had some cakes in the middle of the table, some muffins and stuff, because I was passing a coffee shop and I wanted some cake. So we had those there. And this person had spent half an hour explaining why they were humble and part of the team. And although they were going in at C level, that actually, they're really a normal person. And then they stood up on the way out, and I was about to grab all this stuff and put it in the bin, or take it with me, or put it in the kitchen or whatever. They stood up and said, will somebody tidy up after us in this room then, will they? And I'm like, I can't believe you've just explained to me how humble you are, how, on the ground you are, but you're expecting, and he also was trying to explain how he understood startup culture, that everyone has to get their hands dirty. And then he stood up and was expecting the team to come and tidy up after him. I'm just like, okay, that blew it for me.
That's a great story. And yeah, so other things we could do to add to the list of assessing humility is someone willing to tidy up after themselves?
I know, exactly. I'm board member advisor, and the first thing I did was, I'll tidy up this. And well, why not? That's again part of it. The other, you talked about vulnerability and saying you don't know the answer. It's one of the most motivating things for a leader to say is, I don't know. I don't have that answer. What do you think? How could you, can you give me some ideas to help me solve that problem? And, if you look at Dan Pink, motivation, the autonomy, mastery, and purpose, if somebody feels that they have autonomy and being asked to solve problems, if they feel that they're getting better by trying to solve hard problems, and a purpose, around the organization, helping the leadership team, and they have a personal purpose, that's hugely motivating. So it's a technique I think I wish more leaders would use. I don't know. What do you think? Can you come up with anything to help me solve this problem?
Great advice. So I'm sure the people will be thinking a lot more about how humble they are. Are they really demonstrating that behavior? And what is the kind of like level of humility within their organization? Do they need to be thinking about that more holistically?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope so. Because I think, as I say, many leadership teams would get value from being a little more vulnerable and a little more humble.
Totally. Well, Matt, thanks so much for your insights. It's been truly fascinating and great to reconnect with you and find out more about your work as a CPTO and how you're helping all these companies scale and exit. It's been really insightful.
I've really enjoyed the conversation, and thank you for the questions. And it's been a really interesting chat, Rebecca. So thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us today. If you would like to get in touch with myself or Matt, our details are down below in the contact information. Thanks for listening to the Lucent Perspective. I'm Rebecca Hastings, founder and director at the Lucent Group, a tech sector executive search and talent consultancy. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. If you're a company looking to hire top technology leaders, or you'd like to discuss your next move, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or send me an email to rebecca@thelucentgroup.co.uk. Thanks again for listening today.